So first, if we do it in order of first to graduate, is Tony Bonilla, who's right next to me, to my left. And Tony Bonilla, I'm going to introduce each of them together, and then we'll ask questions. So Tony Bonilla graduated 1960. He was our first Hispanic graduate. So think about it. He was our first graduate of underrepresented background. He was our first minority graduate from law school in 1960, before the Civil Rights Act. Before the Civil Rights Act, he came and became our law school students. And he went on to become president of LULAC. He was the first Hispanic representative from Nueces County. He has his own firm that he's still, Bonilla and Chapa, that he's still working with. And we're very proud of all his accomplishments and contributions to the law school and to society generally. So let's welcome Tony Bonilla. Next is Tony is Ruby Klasanda, who graduated in 1962. She was one of only 5 or 6 women in her law school class at the University of Houston Law Center. She became the first woman Supreme Court judge. She was one of the first women judges in Harris County. Did I say she graduated valedictorian? She actually argued her first case before the Texas Supreme Court shortly after graduating. She actually passed the bar exam before she graduated from law school. That's Justice Ruby Klasanda. Let's welcome her. Next to Justice Sanda is Bill Sim. Bill Sim is our first Asian American graduate. He graduated from the law school in 1969. He actually was a surgical nurse before coming to law school, sold full of brushes, among other things, and opened up an immigration practice and has had a very successful immigration practice at William Y. Sim, PC. Let's welcome Bill Sim. And next to Bill Sim is Jim Lamont, who's our first African-American graduate. He graduated in 1970. He became the first African-American graduate, but also the first African-American equity partner at the Winstead firm. He was a judge in the Judge Advocate Corps. He had worked at Exxon, a corporation, among many of his accomplishments, and he's a very strong mentor to our BALSA students here. Let's welcome Jim Lamont. And next to Jim is Phyllis Randolph Fry, who graduated in 1981 from the law school. She also has an MBA from UH. She went to Texas A&M. I was part of the Army Corps. She has a degree in engineering. She had been in the military. She was a lieutenant in the military. And she became the first transgender judge in the country, maybe the world. Let's welcome Judge Phyllis Randolph Fry. So this is going to be a facilitated conversation among our pioneers, because I think their stories are going to be very, very important and instrumental to all of us, because we're going through kind of difficult times now, and they were here when there was Vietnam War and civil rights and all these other struggles. So let's hear about them. So the first question to the group, and I may follow up with the questions to see if I want to get additional answers from you all. The first question is what's the most memorable moment that you had in law school or in your career? So Tony, why don't we start with you?
Well, I think I'm on.
Are you on?
On?
There you are.
Okay. Well, the one thing that I recall is walking in through the front doors of the library, walking downstairs, and being a captive of the law school. There was only one getaway, and that was the back door. And if you wanted to become a lawyer, you had to stay in that library and work. And that's what I did. Had great professors, great students who embraced me. I want to tell you a little bit about my background because I came from a small town in central Texas, and there's a railroad track and the main road that separates the white community from the Mexican-American and black community. So we'd go to school, in the white school, in the afternoon, we'd go back to our home, and we grew up with African-American youngsters playing football, baseball, hops, marbles, every kind of game imaginable. So the community I lived in did not embrace Mexican Americans. I couldn't get a haircut in the barber shop. Certainly couldn't date anybody. So my father would say, just get your education and go on about your business. And that's what we did. So when I graduated from law school, I joined my brother, who was already established in the law practice. And I found out in my new hometown that the postmistress would not allow Mexican Americans to take care of the public at their windows. They could not work at the windows. They could not answer the telephone. The police department, despite all our population of Hispanics, only had one Mexican-American officer with rank. The fire department was the same way. So I decided that since I had already lived through this segregated community, I was not going to let that happen in my new community, and became very active in civil rights and worked very closely with Dr. Hector P. Garcia, and in later years with Jesse Jackson and some of the other noted civil rights leaders. I can tell you that as a result of our efforts, the postmistress was replaced and the Mexican American became assistant postmaster and was in charge of taking care of all these problems we'd had. The fire department and immediately began promoting Mexican Americans to positions, and the police department did as well. So in reality, even though I was not gearing to be a civil rights activist or a lawyer, that's what I ended up doing for the first 30 years of my life as a lawyer. Travel all over the country addressing these issues. I will tell you something. I want to borrow a phrase from a recent induction into the Hall of Fame, Baseball Hall of Fame. I told my wife, did you ever believe in your wildest dreams that I would come back to the law school and speak to the students and to the alumni? And she said, well, Tony, she looked at me and Tony, you're not in my wildest dreams. So I thought I'd throw that in, because without the support of my wife, I would not have been able to do the things that I've done over the years. My first case ever was in municipal court, and I was extremely nervous, as you can imagine, my very first case. And we won it on a technicality, and I was off and running from then on as an attorney. Dean, I want to close that part by commending you for the vision and the leadership you have provided this law school in doing things that I doubt any other law school in the country has done, and that is recognize the diversity in the community, in the legal community, embrace that diversity in an effort to provide a real education to all the students so that when they leave here, they will have been around people who represent America as individuals, different races, different ethnicity, and that's what makes us a great nation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Tony. Justice Sondak, what's your most memorable experience?
Well, my story is really so different from anybody else's. You see, I wasn't going to work. My husband didn't want me going to work, and I wasn't going to work. I was just going to get an education that was going to make me the best legal secretary in town, because those women are the ones who really made the money. And I started law school, and it just happened. I don't know even how to tell you. Tony and I were in law school together, and he can tell you that I used to come in and open my books, and because I had to carpool at 2 o'clock. So I had to get everything done from before 2 o'clock. And for me, it was just a chore, really, but it was something that I was going to do. And then one day, I decided to take the bar because I was never sure that my husband was, I don't mean to make him sound like an ogre, because he wasn't. He just had this hang up that I was not going to work. So anyway, when I came back from taking the bar, which I was afraid if I didn't take it at 73 hours, I wouldn't be able to be a lawyer. So I knew if I took it 73 hours and I was lucky enough to pass, no problem. So anyway, I did that, and then when I took the bar, Don Fullenwider, I don't know how many of you know in this room, I know one lawyer for sure knows him as well as I did, but he was a wonderful fellow who called me and decided that I would come to work, that I would come to interview that day for the fellow that he worked for. That was Fred Parks. He was one of the best known lawyers in town at that time. And so I said, Don, I can't come to work today because you know what I look like. I used to run my fingers through my hair when I studied. So he talked me into going to the beauty shop. So I did, okay, I'll go to the beauty shop and then I'll come over and I'll meet this man. He said, you have to come meet him because he's coming back at noon during trial. He's coming over to meet you. And I don't know how Don ever knew that I was going to do that, because I certainly never gave him any idea I was going to work. Anyway, so I met this man who was about 6 feet tall. And he finally said to me, can you work full time? Now, does anybody understand that when a lawyer says, can you work full time, they're not talking about 40 hours. So that finally dawned on me. So I said, no, I couldn't work full time. So he said, what about 40 hours? I said, no, couldn't work full time. Remember, I didn't want this job. Then we went down the road to 30 hours. No. He said 20 hours. Well, you know, that gets kind of embarrassing. You gotta say something. So I said, well, I don't know about 20 hours. He said, I'll make this deal with you. I've got to go back to the courthouse, but I'll make this deal with you. as long as you make a sizable contribution to the office, I don't care when you come, and I don't care when you go. So you see, somebody made me an offer that you couldn't refuse. Anyway, so that started my legal career when I was still in law school. And I don't know how I did it. I don't know how women do it today. But I'm very, very glad that I did. And I'm also very, very, I was always very, very appreciative of what Don did for me. And whenever I spoke in the public, I always said, but for Don Fullenwider, I never would have practiced law.
Remote work. Before its time. Thank you, Justice Sondog. Bill, what's your most memorable experience?
Well, last week we have a Zoom conference. I was told, well, you talk too long, so I'm going to make it very short. Now, I'm supposed to be a pioneer. That is really by luck and coincidence. When I applied, I didn't know I'm going to be a pioneer, the first Asian American. Well, then you say, what special occasion you remember as a student? Well, I'm just an average student. Because I have to make a living for myself and my family, self-support. So I just really just get by. I wasn't that good a student. But after school, well, I remember two things. After school, we have an Asian American Bar Association. Then we invited a lawyer from the East by the name of Johnny Lee. And Johnny Lee told us he graduated from Yale. So he sent his resume to different big firms in the East. And one of the big firms hiring management lawyer, the partner will call. And he said, Mr. Lee, don't worry. We are a Yale firm. All the members are Yale from Yale. We can always find a space for another Yale. So Mr. Lee make an appointment to see the hiring manager. And after he go in, the manager say, but, I did not expect Johnny Lee to look like you. That is the situation at that time when I was a lawyer. And then later on, well, a few months later, well, we went to meeting, more and more Asian lawyers, including Indian, but not too many Indian, mostly are Chinese from Taiwan. And I noticed in our directory, one of the young lawyers working in Houston for a law firm, big law firm. I told myself, wow, we have arrived. That was the happiest day of my life. It might be window dressing, but still, they are hiring us. We have a hope. And at one time, I told the young lawyer, three of us, on an occasion, senior lawyer, we are so much older, and I told them, well, we have dug a well. Now it's your duty, you, and you, to fetch the water from the well and use the water to help whichever coming the next generation. And that was the happiest day of my life. Now, if it's too short, I add a little more something.
Go for it.
Go for it. Now, I practiced immigration law for 50 odd years, ever since then. Now, I want to say two things. If you want to make money, please don't practice immigration law. You will have long hours, you will work hard, but you can charge too much. Your client don't have money. And what's the reward? This is my reward. I help people to come here to realize, achieve their American dream. What do you mean? Well, number one, we have people who are born on the wrong side of the street, so to speak. Back home, if your daddy is a rickshaw boy, you will be rickshaw boy. There is no way you can go up. But not in this country. Give you an example. I have a tile layer, he laid tile from Costa Rica. He came to our house and laid some tile, and I talked to him. Then later on, in law, we say colloquially, we call them, you regularize their status. That means we make them become permanent residents or, general public become a green card holder. And they are so grateful to me. If they have clients, friends, introduce them, they always bring them themselves. They tell me, this particular case, Mr. Sim, I want you to know, my son is practicing doctor in Dallas. My second son, he is an engineer now. These are the wrong side of the fence where they were born. We have another type of client. They are middle class. They come here, well, they either have some money going to business or most of them, they already have one degree. They come to get a master's degree. Give you one example. We can call him Mr. L. Well, before he came, waiting for his visa, he worked for a Chinese newspaper in Taiwan. He told me after I got him his green card, and there's his wife, Mr. Sim, I always like newspaper business. And I call my friend, 5 of them. At that time, Chinese population was growing by leaps and bounds in Houston, Texas. And I tell my friend, well, we're going to come up with each and every one of us $500 each. So we got $3,000 for Mr. L to start the business. My office always very big, 3,000 feet or more. I gave him a part of the small office free. So after a few $500 each, Mr. L tell me, Mr. Sim, I can be on my own now. Today, he's the biggest Chinese newspaper publisher in the whole United States, in Chicago, in Atlanta, in San Francisco, Los Angeles, all the big towns. More than that. Well, he owns television station. More than that, he owns a bank. These are people come here to achieve their American dream. I asked one of my clients who immigrated when they were younger to Sweden. I say, Sweden, Norway, they are the best happiness index in the whole world. Why do you want to come to America? He told me, Mr. Sim, America is the only country in the whole world you can work hard, follow the law, and make big bucks. That's what it is. And I'm so happy because I see my client doing so well, all of them. I walk down the street lots of time, somebody walk up to me, Mr. Sim, do you remember me? Of course I don't. Yes, I remember. I have to lie. Well, you see, you get my green card, my son doing that, I'm doing this. It makes me so happy. And I am very, very, very happy for what I do to other people to achieve the American dream. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill. Jim, what's your most memorable moment?
Can I be heard? Do you hear? First, Dean, thank you for inviting me. You know, this is not the kind of stuff that I like being involved in, as you well know, but I told someone earlier today, Dean does not take no for an answer from anybody. So I'm here, but I'm proud to be among this group of outstanding, amazing people, and I'm glad to share their moments with me and to learn things about what they've done. As to myself, I want to say, first, I never saw myself as a barrier breaker or a trailblazer. No such thing. I started college in 1960 and lived through the turbulent 60s that the dean spoke of. I started out at Prairie View A&M University to study engineering, which I did, because I couldn't go to the University of Texas or to Texas A&M University, and the only black school I was able to attend was Prairie View, which I did. In 1962, I learned that the state legislature had authorized the University of Houston to transition from a private school to a public school. So I applied prior to my junior year of engineering at Prairie View to become a transfer student in engineering to the University of Houston. Well, I got a letter back from U of H at the time, and it generally said, Mr. Lamont, thank you so much for having interest in coming and being admitted to the University of Houston. However, I need to let you know that our school is not yet prepared to admit persons of your race to our fine university. That was 1962. So I just accepted that and went on with my engineering studies. I actually worked in engineering on the East Coast. But in 1964, the University of Houston began accepting black students. So I applied again as a transfer student, and in 1965, I was able to come to the University of Houston and obtain my degree. Now, as to law school, the thing that affected me more than anything happened before I got into law school. Excuse me. I missed a step that when I came back to the University of Houston, because at that time, every male in the United States was subject to mandatory draft into the military. And so I chose to go to the Advanced Corps ROTC at the University of Houston, where I was the first black person to be a part of Advanced Corps ROTC. So after 2 years, I would earn a commission in the military. Well, in between, I got admitted to law school, and so in 1968, I became the first African-American graduate of the University of Houston to receive a commission in the armed forces. So that was just something because I chose a particular path. Law school was a similar experience. I wasn't setting out to be a pioneer or a trailblazer or anything. I set an objective, and with the full and complete support of my wife, I said, I know what the objective is, and this is what I need to do to reach that objective. I needed to finish law school. So it was a challenge that I presented to myself, had nothing to do with anybody else in the world. But in 1968, when I got that commission, I realized that I would not be the last African American to receive such an honor. So with law school, I took the same type of path and said, you know what? if I continue on and graduate, I might open a path, a tiny path, for others to come behind me, as Bill Sim just pointed out, and widen that path to give opportunities to other people. Now, in the 60s, the turbulence that the dean spoke of, I mean, we can start with the assassinations, President Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers. This was all happening in the 60s that I was a part of. Those things, those people that fought for the things they stood for created an opportunity for people like me to take advantage of, and it resulted in the passage, as you know, of the Civil Rights Act of 1954, which prohibited discrimination on the basis of race, sex, national origin. Then the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, then the Fair Housing Act of 1968. But all of those things caused me to say, I have to do something to follow those people that opened the door for me to be able to come to the University of Houston's law school. So by the time I graduated from law school, it was merely the completion of the objective that I had set out for myself. It just happened to be that I was Black. But I will say one thing that was rather interesting during my time at law school. For the entire 3 years that I went to law school here, I was the only African-American law student in the entire law school in the day division. You say, well, how did you handle that? Big deal, like every other day. I got up, I did what I was supposed to do, and I was trying to reach my objective, and I ultimately did. So in the sense of all of this, I think that I had the obligation to complete that objective, to graduate. And over the course of the 54 years or so that I have been licensed as a lawyer, I see all of these wonderful statistics of African-American lawyers achieving, from the University of Houston's law school, achieving all of this success in many, many areas. And I think back to my pushing open that little tiny path that widened with all the others coming after me. So those are the kinds of things that I recall from my turbulent 60s. And how it affected me. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, Jim. Next, Judge Fry. What's your most memorable moment?
I've got a bunch of them. I'll be short. My turbulent era began in the 70s. Graduate Texas A&M military officer, and they wanted to run me out because it became known, because I didn't make a secret of it, that I really wanted to be a woman. And so I fought with them until I got an honorable discharge. And I was still living as a man. I practiced engineering for a number of years. And then in 1976, with the support and love of my wife, I transitioned and went full-time. In 1977, I stepped into the courtroom of Judge Sondag, and bless her heart, she changed my name. I came to law school primarily because when I transitioned, the engineering firms in town blackballed me, and I could not get work. So I decided to use my GI Bill and go back to school. And I applied and was accepted at this law school. At the time, there was, and still is, restroom ordinances. And there was a cross-dressing city ordinance. The law school got around the restroom ordinance by assigning me a restroom, 3 restrooms on campus. And as it turned out, none of those were close to my study carrel, my first year classroom, or the law library. And so after about a month, I began using the restrooms that were closer to those 3 places because I was tired of having an accident. I was called in and asked about it, and I explained what I just told you. And I said, how many women here at the law school are worried about me in the restroom? And the dean of students said 5. And I said, out of the entire law school, only 5 students are upset about where I go to the restroom? And he said, yes. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, tell them I'll use this one and this one and this one, and they can have the other 5. So that took care of that problem. The cross-dressing ordinance was in effect essentially what it had been going on for about 40 years, 50 years. It was definitely an anti-queer ordinance. And it said that if you were a guy and you dressed as a woman, you were subject to arrest. And I came to law school knowing that I could be arrested. Everybody knew I could be arrested. There were several times in my experience, not at the law school, but around town, that I was almost arrested. And as I entered my 3rd year of law school, it was time to do an internship. And I wanted to do my internship with the district attorney's office because I knew no law firm would hire me. And I wanted courtroom experience. And so Jim Hensley was the professor at the time who was in charge of assigning 3Ls to various law firms or the DA's office or anyplace else for their internship. And the district attorney at that time, Johnny Holmes, told him that if I showed up, I would be arrested. No, he told him he would not accept me, period. And Professor Hensley said, if you will not accept her, you will not get any more students from the University of Houston Law School. Brave man. And so the DA said, if he shows up in a dress, we'll put him in jail. Well, I'd been lobbying city council for several years about the ordinance. And the day before I was supposed to show up at the DA's office, it got repealed. Thank goodness. So I didn't get arrested. There were 2 very memorable things in law school as an attorney. I did a lot of criminal defense work at first. And of course, if you do criminal defense work from time to time, you need to go to trial. And of course, that means you need to voir dire a jury. And from the very beginning, with the jury panel, I was very much out of the closet. And when I voir dired from the very beginning, I always made sure that the panel, the Venari panel, knew that I was trans, and I explained to them what that meant. And then as I went along asking people, what their various biases and prejudices were, usually around 4, 5, or 6, somebody would say, well, I've got a real problem with you being trans. And I said, well, that's fine. And then I'd go a little bit further and somebody else would voice that problem. And by the time I finished, I had about a dozen people who were ultra-conservative who were going to convict my client no matter what he or she did. And so I was able to get a for cause strike on all of those people. I didn't have to waste a single peremptory strike on any of them. I still lost some trials, but it was nice to have a panel, a jury that would actually listen. And the other thing I'm very proud of was being very inventive in the law with respect to trans people. Because in the late 80s, I started taking, I was petitioned by some trans people to take them through court and get their names changed. And that was not a problem, getting their names changed. But within a couple of years, several of them came to me and they said, well, you changed my name from Ralph to Susan, but it still says M on my driver's license. Or you changed my name from Judy to Thomas, but it still says F on my driver's license. And if you look at your driver's license, it says sex. Well, nobody had had surgery. And so I petitioned to change the gender marker on the driver's license. And that's what my petition said, and that's what I argued, and that's the court order that I got. And my clients would send a court order that said change the gender marker from M to F or F to M, and DPS did it. So I was, very proud of being inventive that way. Towards the very end of my legal career doing this, it became obvious to me that the judges were very receptive. Some of them were, some of them weren't. Since I did not have opposing counsel, I did a lot of forum shopping. If you don't have opposing counsel, friends, forum shop. I don't care what they tell you about forum shopping. If you don't have opposing counsel, forum shop. And I did. And a lot of the judges were willing to change sex on the birth certificate if the doctor's letter said that they had done enough to warrant a sex change, even though they hadn't had surgery. The judges felt comfortable because they had a medical letter into evidence that said, in their medical opinion, the person had completed a sex change. So my legal career was very inventive, and I'm very proud of that. I had to quit practicing law several years ago when my wife got ill and then passed, and then the next year I got off the bench, but it was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Judge Fry. I want to follow up a little bit before I get to this second question I've given you all. So one thing I hear from at least 4 of your stories is that, maybe modestly, they're saying, we just showed up, right? You just not showed up, but you came to law school and you happen to be here at this time. And I wonder, I appreciate that as a question, that you came and you applied and it had nothing to do with your race or gender, et cetera, that you applied and you came. But were you aware of the societal forces? Were you aware that you were the first? Were you aware that, were you afraid? I mean, there's a little bit of vulnerability, I guess, right? But were you afraid to be the first? I mean, because I think our students even today sometimes feel afraid, right? Because even though there's a lot of change and there's a lot of people in different positions, it's like, well, I'm going to be, we have our first African-American, South Asian woman candidate. Would she be afraid, for president, right? Would she be anxious? Maybe afraid is the wrong word. Could she legitimately be anxious being in that position? Because there's still a lot of positions people haven't held of different backgrounds. So maybe getting a little bit deeper, but do you think, what was your feeling about going on? So, Tony.
In my case, I was embraced by the students. I never even thought about the fact that I was a minority. I was in law school to get my law degree and go to work, get married, buy a house, and have children. That was what we were raised to think. So I never even knew that I was the only Latino or Hispanic or Mexican American in law school. And I did not know I was the first one to graduate until I read your article one time saying that I had been the first one. The professors, the student body, my fellow classmates, we were all friends, and we helped each other. And you know, in those days, we didn't have laptops or iPads, so it was one-on-one with our classmates, and we would study during the day, take a break for lunch, come back and study some more, and then take a break for dinner, and we'd go out. Two or three of us would go out together to have dinner. That's the way it was in my day.
Well, let me follow up for another time. Is that because you indicated where you were from, there was a segregation, there were black and Hispanics on one side of the tracks and whites on the other side of the tracks, and that, you know, you came back and that's why you decided to be a civil rights leader that you've been. So how do you explain the difference between, you know, was the law school a special place? Because I think if you grew up in that environment, you may feel like, well, you know, this is the way I may be treated anywhere, right? If I'm treated this way in my hometown. So how did you reconcile that?
It was easy because nobody saw me as being different. One saw me. I didn't speak with an accent. I was a nice looking guy. So nobody threw me under the bus. They were I remember the judge coming into through the back door. In fact, that's the way you used to come in, through the back door, with a whole bunch of books. And I was so impressed with her, and she was such a great student. And we'd speak to each other. There was never anyone even suggesting that I was Mexican American or different. That was something I'm very proud of about the law school.
Good, thank you. Justice Sondak, you're only 5 women in your class.
Well, with me, we had, well, it was really great camaraderie, really, to the extent that I could. But they used to always ask, why don't you ever go with us to go get coffee? Just, Ruby, we're not going to rape you, you know. But I didn't have the time. I never had the time to go get a cup of coffee. So, but the professors, Olds and Blakely, we had the best professors that this school has ever had. And we had great camaraderie, really, to the extent that I could, you know, if we saw them, probably all I could do is talk to you in the hall. But I just didn't have the time, so I'm not a very good example of what he said.
Bill.
Okay. Allow me. Normally, when I talk face to face, I hear you real well. I don't hear you well. Can you? Next day.
The question.
Normally, I don't use a hearing aid. For the purpose of today, I use hearing aid. I don't know it help any at all. So,
Question. Okay. So one thing is that many of you had said that you just came to law school. You came to law school because you wanted to be a lawyer. And
forgive me.
okay. Many of you said that you came to law school because you wanted to be a lawyer.
Yes.
And that you really didn't think about being the first Asian American or whatnot. And so I guess I want to ask, how did you reconcile that with what may have been going on in the world? Because, right, in terms of the rest of the country and whatnot.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for giving me the special privilege of talking to you closely,
Absolutely.
so I can hear better. Well, I really believe that we should encourage the next generation to go forward, to do what is best to open more doors for especially us minorities. And if need be, we have to go to court and file lawsuit to make it work so that we will be part of society to contribute fully instead of just on the sideline. Basically, we have to go from now on to fight for our right, because it appears to me our civil right is going backwards for the last 2-3 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim?
The question, I'm sort of like Bill.
Oh, you didn't hear my
but
question? So, I mean, for you, you said, I'm going to law school.
Yes.
I happen to be here. I happen to go be an RTOC. I happen to be, it just happened, was the question. That's what many of you said. It just happened. In essence, I think you're saying you're in the right place at the right time. And then my question is like, well, on one hand, you say you're cognizant, you're understanding the circumstances you're in. You're understanding, that you are, you talked about the assassinations, you talked about civil rights struggle. And so the question really was or is, did you not realize you're making this major venture, this major possible accomplishment? And for students, what I was saying is that from some students and some people, there's still a lot of accomplishments to be made. Were you anxious about doing it, is the question.
Well, I guess I would say during the time I was at law school, first I was married when I got into law school. My son was born in my second semester of law school, a third semester or so. He's present here today. He's also
Scott, where's Scott?
also
There's Scott.
University of Houston law graduate. Proud of that. So I had the family background. My wife worked while I went to school. She worked at NASA. I was here. I also came in mid-year of January of 1967. So there were maybe 20 or 25 people who were admitted at the same time. So we had all come same way, and we became close because we were assigned in the same classes. So during the days, we all were here from similar circumstances that simply said, we're here to get our law degrees. And all of those 20, other than 2, were also married. So we formed a bond somewhat amongst us. We studied together. We visited together. We socialized. It wasn't extensively, but it was enough to create a bond among us, and we all graduated. So in that sense, we were here for the purpose of graduation, and we helped each other. So we didn't stray from that very much. Now, listening to Judge Sondak and to Tony Bonilla, if I had been under those, at the times that they were here under the same circumstances, it probably would have been very different. But as Judge Sondak said, the law professors were phenomenal. It didn't matter. There were liberal law professors, and there were ultra-conservative law professors. The no-nonsense versus the ones who were very flexible. But never, I didn't see signs of discrimination based on race. You knew what you had to do if you were in that one professor's class, you knew what that person expected, and so you did what was expected. It didn't matter what their political views were, because you were here to learn the law. And so that's how I proceeded, and that's how most of my classmates that came in mid-year when I did, that's how they approached the study of law. So, however, I'll reiterate that if it had been 10 years earlier, I think it would have been very different for me, because you didn't have, when I got in, you did have the Civil Rights Act 1964. You did have civil rights being, you had legislation that was being passed. If that legislation weren't there, we'd have to go back to what Bill said. You got to fight. And I know the next segment will talk about some of those things, so I won't go into that, but what Bill is saying is fight, and fight for what you believe in. That's what needed to be done back in the 60s, and when those fights occurred and we gained the protections under the law, it was my obligation, I saw, to fulfill the expectations of those who fought for those changes that gave me an opportunity, and I felt it was necessary for me to continue to the push to widen the path, as I said, for others to come behind me.
I just want to say
just
something
before-
that, you know, women had it, I didn't mean to make it sound easy. Women had it very tough in those days. But also there was there were professors at Texas that would announce in the beginning of the semester that women could sit in the class, but they will not be seen, nor will they be heard.
Wow.
And I mean, that's bad to have to, I didn't have that.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that. Judge Fry.
Ask me again. Echo in this room is horrible.
Okay, so what kind of experiences did you have at the law school? So
I had mixed experiences. I went to the law school out of the closet. I was very much out of the closet. Most people in law school are busy trying to get through law school.
Right.
And so most of the students knew who I was, and they knew what I was. And without being rude or ugly or anything of that sort, they mostly just ignored me. They went to class, they walked in and out of the various hallways going where they were going, and went home. And so, but there were some who were in my section who were just nice people. They just were. And so during that first year, I was able, and continuing on through, I was able to have a couple of dozen people who were very friendly to me. My biggest problem throughout the entire law school was the Christian Legal Society. They pretty much made my life miserable. And at the last semester of my third year, I was able to get the Christian Legal Society put on a campus-wide probation for discrimination. But other than that, I enjoyed law school. You know, I'm an engineer, and I think like an engineer, and that used to drive prosecutors in the criminal courts crazy. A lot of them said, "You don't practice like a lawyer. You just don't. And I said, "You mean I practice like an engineer? I'm goal-oriented." Yeah, I guess that's it. And you know, I am an engineer. I didn't go through engineering school learning how to write. And the first year of law school, every exam is written. You got to write it all down. And at the end of the first year of law school, after everybody who flunked out, there were only 2 names below mine that were still in school. That's how close I came to flunking out. But I figured it all out, and I am proud to say that when I did graduate, I was at the very top of the bottom third. I don't know where I was. But I graduated, and I passed the bar the first time.
That's right.
And I'm very proud of law school. The professors, I heard, had a huge discussion about me coming to school before, when I applied. And I heard they went on and on and on and on, and finally said, she's made her grades. My engineering grades from Texas A&M is what got me in. It was not my LSAT. My LSAT was horrible, but I did get in because my engineering grades were so high. But the faculty there was not a single faculty member that wasn't cordial to me. Even though I could tell at the beginning that they were very conservative, they were still very cordial. And that's how I got through law school. I would go to my professors, because in the big meeting rooms the first year, there's the professors usually get names of all the students and where they sit. And I would go to those professors and I would say, these people aren't talking to me. I need to know who they are. Could you give me a copy of your seating chart? And so every class that I went to, I had a seating chart and I learned people's names. People are funny. If you call them by name, most people are very friendly and they'll respond to you. And so I started calling people by name, and they were very cordial when I spoke to them by name. But the first year was tough. I flunked contracts both semesters, and I made a D in torts. And the professor that flunked me is United States Senator Elizabeth Warren. And both semesters, when I got an F, I went in to see, what the deal was. And both times, she was just blown away that she had flunked me, because she had definitely done blind grading. She said, I don't understand this. You always speak up in class. You've obviously read your lessons. You know what's going on. And I said, yeah, that's true, but I don't write well. And she flunked me both times. That's the way it is. I passed the bar, and I started practicing. I couldn't get work for a number of years, and a friend of mine said to me, every 2 years, because I was a member of the local then gay political caucus, now the GLBT political caucus, and every 2 years, when it's election time, the caucus has a screening for anybody, Republican or Democrat or Independent, who's running for an office and wants the caucus endorsement. And I always did the screening committees. And so over a couple of years, I got to know some of the judges, and they got to know me as a trans person. And so this friend of mine said, these judges know you, especially the misdemeanor court judges. Why don't you go and ask them for a court appointment? And so I did. And I got a few court appointments. And I found out I was a damn good trial lawyer. I really was. That was the first, I'd say, 15 years of my practice was as a appointed attorney in the criminal courts. Anyway, that's more answer than you wanted. That's the way it went.
Thank you, Judge Fry. So some have said that the U.S. is going backwards, and we have recent Supreme Court opinion that's overturned a lot of different a lot of groundbreaking cases that occurred while you were barrier breaking, right? And so, what lessons have you learned that you would convey to the next generation as they go through what they may perceive as another tumultuous time? Tony.
Well, I think, first of all, that today's law students should not be thinking about becoming lawyers and getting rich because of all of the advertising that is shown by lawyers. And I might as well make this point now, that is the worst thing that's happened to the legal profession is the advertising that is permitted for the lawyers, because people start thinking that their cases are always going to be worth millions because of all this great money that lawyers get. So if you're a student and you're watching this program, get your law degree with the purpose of providing a service to your clients and to your community. I think that right now, more than ever, the local bar should be deeply involved in having the lawyers participate in, as a speaker, create a speakers bureau that could talk to the middle school students and the high school students about the Constitution, about the Bill of Rights, about democracy, because so many people have been mistaken about what we are as a country and as a democracy. I think students, local lawyers, the local bars should create committees that will help immigrants become American citizens, those who are qualified, those who have met their responsibilities and legal hurdles, who want to become American citizens. The bar should play a role in that and provide educational training so that they can become citizens. And I think the state bar should have a task force that could play a big role in talking about these same issues that I'm talking about that the local bar should be addressing. Those are some of my thoughts.
Thank you, Tony. Justice Sondag.
Can you restate your question?
So what would you tell this generation of of students and younger attorneys, what would you tell them that you learned while you were barrier breaking? Like, it seems like there was a lot of progress in the beginning, with a lot of different laws, civil rights, et cetera. And it seems like we're going backwards. So what would you tell them? How would you suggest they think about, conduct themselves during what may be perceived to be tumultuous times, right?
I don't see us going backwards. I don't like the way we are, but I just can't see us going backwards. Now, maybe because I'm not Chinese, maybe that's one of the things, but I can't see us going backwards. I love this country, and I know it's the best in the world.
Let me ask it this way to you. You say there's some things you don't like. What would you suggest with, at times are uncertain, there's a lot of uncertainty. We've had, as Jim said, there were assassination attempts or assassinations actually in the 60s. There's been 2 assassination attempts now. So I think for a lot of students, there's a lot of stuff that, and young people, it's like all this is uncertain to them. So what would you suggest how they think about things or do? What do you think?
I don't know that I could perhaps make things better than they are. I think the violence that has come up is something that's got to be dealt with. It can't go on. But I don't know that I have the answer. I really don't. I don't think that I have the answer. I know that this country can be a lot better than it is right now. But things change from time to time. And I have great confidence in this country. As I say, I'm convinced it's the best place in the world, and I'm glad my folks were here when I was born.
Thank you, Justice Sondag. Bill.
To me, the biggest problem in America, personal opinion, is, hey, the two-party. Democrats say yes, Republicans always say no. Republicans say no, they always say yes. Never get together. To me, this is the biggest problem in America. Forgive me, even in totalitarian system, even communists, when they make a decision, they always pull on the same side. That's it. And somehow, if the two can get together, America will really advance tremendously. This is, to me, the biggest problem. They don't get along.
Thank you.
Not because I don't like your idea, because I don't like you are on the other party. Anything you say, I'm against it. That is nobody in the whole world governed like that. And if somehow some people will see the big picture and get together, America will really advance tremendously.
Thank you, Bill. Jim.
Well, as I see today, of course, with the backdrop of the advances of the 1960s, there's an assault on our civil rights right now. Mm-hmm. And it's being fostered by people who want to go back to the good old days. The good old days weren't good days for many of us, particularly minorities. The colored water fountains that I drank from growing up, the colored restrooms that I had to go to, if there were colored restrooms. The remembrance that on a trip to California once by bus, the bus stopped in West Texas, and I was one of maybe a couple of minorities on the bus. All the rest of the people, I was the only black person on the bus. I was 14 years old. All the rest of the members went into the restaurant to get a hamburger. I was walking in, I was stopped and taken to the side of the restaurant to this little window that said, "This is where you order your hamburger." And I said, "Then I won't order a hamburger." So I got back on the bus. I thought the deal was done. 2 state troopers came onto the bus and asked me, "Boy, what do you think you're doing? And who do you think you are?" All I wanted was the same hamburger anybody else wanted. So that had a profound effect on me. So all the advances of the legislation created opportunities for me, and now I see all of those opportunities being assaulted. by millions of people who believe that they're doing the right thing by backtracking or backpedaling. Women's reproductive rights, my goodness gracious, how can people, reasonable people, conclude that women shouldn't have the right to do as they wish with their own bodies? The assault on people who happen to be gay or lesbian, and they love who they love, and you can't express it, and it's being taken away from you. Our voting rights, my goodness gracious, we were given the opportunity to vote in fair and free elections, and now legislation is being pushed by many states and by people in the federal government to take away those rights. That's what I see is the danger in war. It's an assault on our civil rights. I'm concerned about it. I don't know of any other way to say it other than what Mr. Sim has pointed out time and again. You've got to fight, 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 and understand that it's a big fight. You've got to accept it. You've got to accept the challenge, and yet you have to be focused on your objective of keeping all of those assaults at bay.
Thank you, Jim. Just fine.
Well, I'm going to sing the same song that he sang. You're absolutely right. I remember growing up, you know, despite my being an Eagle Scout, despite my being the ROTC commander in my high school, despite me going to college on 2 scholarships, despite me being a regular Army officer as opposed to a reserve commissioned officer, despite my having licensed engineering with my 2 degrees in engineering, despite all of that, I ran into a buzzsaw. But I won. I invite you to Google my name, because you will find the New York Times article from 2016 that I'm very proud of, because it was on the front page above the fold of a Sunday edition of the New York Times. And it's a good article. You will also find a reference to a biography that was written about me a couple of years ago. Despite everything that was thrown at me and my wife, we survived and we made it. And we became very, very successful. I encourage all of you who are LGBTQ+ to come out of the closet. Yeah, it's hard, but it's the only way to live, is being out of the closet. And those of you who are not, but know in your heart that you already know or like some LGBTQ people, come out to them that you're receptive and loving and friendly, so that it'll make their life easier. Right now, my community is being attacked, and the parents of trans kids are being attacked. I was 4 years old when I knew something was different. This was in 1952. But every time I exhibited anything that was feminine, I was corrected and encouraged not to, and encouraged to do things that were masculine. And after a while, after a couple of years of that, you learn, you know, that if you don't want to be bullied or ridiculed or punished or anything of that sort, that you do what you need to do. And so I became extremely successful as a boy, even though every day I wanted to be a girl. And what's going on now is that some of these trans kids that I was back in 1952, 53, 54, because of the internet, are learning that they're not the only ones and are coming out to their parents. And their parents are very loving and trying to help and support their kids. And they are being attacked. So, if you need to come out of the closet, either as an LGBTQ person, come out. If you need to come out of the closet as an LGBTQ supportive and loving individual, come out.
Thank you, Judge. One last point, then we open it to questions from the audience.
Everybody acknowledges that things are happening that we don't necessarily like, all the progress that's been made. So my message to all of you, lawyers, to get involved. Those of you who are already lawyers, get involved. Don't sit idly by and let people take books out of the classroom, the library. It's not right. Everybody should get involved to address these changes that are taking place because they're not good for America.
Amen.
That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Tony. Let's take some questions from the audience. Any questions right now? Has to be some questions. You have a question from the online audience?
Yes, Dean. He seems suspicious. What are you doing? We have a great attendance online. We had about 125 join us online. And so one of those questions is, any advice or tips you have learned for students and lawyers starting their careers to deal with adversity?
I didn't
Can you
understand.
repeat that? Most of us don't understand.
Okay, the question is, what advice would you have for young lawyers facing adversity? What advice would you have for young lawyers who are facing adversity?
That's a good question.
Any kind of adversity, I suppose, right? It could be in their careers, it could be anything, right? Any thoughts?
Persist. I mean, you've got a law degree, you've got a law license. Hang in there. Don't give up. I mean, none of us did.
Jim looks like he wants to say
Always-
Plenty of adversity.
You're always going to have adversity at one time or another,
Yep,
and you have to learn to deal with it.
yep.
Be strong, know what you're talking about, be prepared, and you can deal with it successfully. You know, times have really changed. Lawyers, you could just shake hands with a lawyer and it's a done deal. A lot of lawyers don't go by that. It's the old creed, you know. Some lawyers don't return your phone call. Some lawyers don't respond to your communication in writing. So you just have to deal with it.
Any other questions from the audience? Oh, great.
Good afternoon. Are there any changes that you've seen in the legal profession over your decades since graduating that concern you?
There are things you said.
So the question is, do you see any changes in the legal profession, any changes in the legal profession since you graduated that concerns you?
Oh, yeah.
So everybody wants to answer that one.
I think it's day and night.
What'd you say?
I think it's day and night.
Day and night.
The legal profession that I went into doesn't exist anymore.
Explain.
Well, first of all, this Zoom business, and it's just tougher for a lawyer to get started today. I think there's less work. I think there's more lawyers, and I just think it's very, very, very tough for them to get started today. It was miserable for women in my day, but today it doesn't matter, man or woman. I think it's very tough, and in fact, anybody who a lot of people have been, a lot of young people I know have been discouraged about going into law.
Anyone else? No? Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Yes.
Teacher advertising is terrible. This is not so much a question, but this is
Oh, that's what it is too.
Judge
Yeah.
Sondak. I appeared before you when I was a very young lawyer,
What?
long time ago.
I'm sorry, I can't hear him.
Says he appeared before you when he was a young lawyer.
I appeared
What?
before you
Oh.
when I was a young lawyer,
Tell your name. Maybe you remember. William Morris.
Bill Morris.
Oh, really?
And you taught me a valuable lesson because you heard the case, and as we all know, rarely can a judge hear all the facts in a case that might influence the outcome. And you rendered your judgment, and then you looked at the lawyers and you said, I have no pride of authorship. If you can come up with something you think will work better, do so. And I have done that on a number of occasions, especially when I lost. But I appreciate and thank you for that bit of advice.
Thank you. You're on this side? Oh, there we go. Sophia.
Thank you so much for sharing your wonderful stories. I guess, I think as a minority or as a person, I guess a minority, there's always feelings of self-doubt or of thinking a little bit like, I don't belong here or I'm not good enough. So how would you recommend or how did you navigate those feelings of self-doubt? And if you could say, just your advice for younger generations of lawyers that are thinking that way.
Self-doubt. How do you navigate self-doubt, especially if you're a woman or a person of color or a minority lawyer? Any thoughts? How do you deal with self-doubt?
Preparation.
Preparation, okay.
If you're well prepared and you go into the courtroom, you're going to be okay. Now, in the old days, when I started practicing, it was a little different because these judges had been there forever, and they catered to the old timers. But nowadays, I don't think they can get by with that.
Anyone else? Any thoughts besides preparation?
The military teaches you that before you go into battle, whatever it is, have a plan. Because there's an old saying, if you don't know where you're going, any road can get you there. You got to have a plan. You have to have an objective. And then you've got to determine how to stay on track and how you reach your objective. Don't just start the 100-yard dash in the Olympics. Finish it. Understand how to finish. Because if you only run 50 yards and drop out, you haven't achieved your objective. Give yourself an objective that's achievable despite your own self-doubt. Nothing more than what Tony said. Preparation, know where you're headed, stick to your plan, but have a plan.
Great, thank you. I think I saw a hand over here. Yeah.
My question is, if you've had an opportunity to mentor anyone in your legal career, is there anyone who stands out in particular, and what stood out about them?
So the question was, did you mentor anyone in your legal career? Did you mentor anyone in your legal career? And if you did, who stood out?
And why?
And why? So did you mentor anyone in your legal career, and who stood out, and why did they stand out? Any thoughts? Tony,
Well, we have a family of lawyers. We
tell them how many lawyers are in your family now.
probably at least anywhere from 25 to 30.
25, let me just, so 25 to 30, and he was only the second in your family.
That's right.
So he was only the
So-
second in his family, and is now almost 30 in his family.
So everybody in the family, my brother had several children who became lawyers. My second brother had several children who became lawyers. My sister had children who became lawyers. I have 3 lawyers in the family. So we mentored each other as we came along. My older brother, who started the law firm in 1953, he still goes to the office every day. He's not practicing, but he still goes to the office every day wearing a suit and tie.
And don't you also go to the office every day?
I go to the office every day, but I don't wear a suit and tie. And I told my older brother one afternoon, he's on the 3rd floor, I'm on the 1st, and he was walking out and he's all dressed up so well, and I told him, you know, when I grow up, I want to look like you. Because he's never come to the office without a coat and tie. And he mentored me right out of law school. And then I mentored my brother Reuben when he came out of law school. I may have mentored him too well because he became the most radical of all of us.
Listen,
Justice Sando.
the president of the bar is here today, and I know that he's tired of waiting because he's been standing there for a while. And I know he's got some great words and probably will answer the questions for those who have asked, how does a young boy get started in the profession today? I don't know how you get the business. That's the problem. As Tony said a while ago, one of the things that he thinks that's hurting the profession has been the advertising. So anyway, but I'm sure that the man from the state bar has more.
I'm sure he does, but maybe one more question from the audience for you all, because I think we want to hear from Steve, but I think people also want to have your particular insight. So one last question, and then we'll get to Steve. Oh, there we go. Oh, actually, there's a bunch of questions. I'll take all of them together.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for all that you've done, and it's been a great hearing all the stories that you're sharing. Earlier, you all mentioned that you're not happy with what's going on in this nation. There's things that could be better, and then Mr. Lamont said we can't go back. What are you doing individually to make sure that we don't go back? As opposed to, we talked about the legal careers and so forth. What are you doing as a citizen to make sure that this country continues to thrive and be the best that it can be? Because individuals in your position and as advocates or justices, you have the opportunity and the power to make a huge difference. So what are you doing to make sure that we don't go back?
Great, let's take, we'll add on to the question. I saw there was a hand here. Okay.
My problem is I can't hear a single word.
I would just be curious as to what you think about the physical plant, the law school when you were in law school, what we have now.
A third question. I know a lot of you And thank you so much for your stories and for providing the shoulders of what we now stand on. So thank you. We get very serious sometimes in law. I want to know, has there ever been moments of levity, a scenario that was very funny, that you now think back and say, oh my God, I can't believe that happened to me?
Love that question. Okay, so 3 questions.
What was the last one?
So let's start, so the 3 questions are, is there anything funny in your career that you'd like to report on?
Is there anything?
Funny, levity, amusing, is there anything amusing that happened? Anything amusing that happened in your career? What about the physical plant? What about the building compared to old buildings or old buildings? And the third one was, how do you privately, personally make sure we don't go back? How do you what do you do as a citizen to make sure that we move forward? So 3 questions. So let's take them one at a time, and then that'll be it. And then Steve can talk, if that's okay. Okay. Judge Sondag, you can see she runs a tight court. She's keeping me on task.
I practiced before, and I can't tell you how many times I heard, move along.
Very good. So let's do the easy ones first. The building. What was the building like? Let's go back this way. Let's go back in time. No, but it wasn't just, it was, were you in the library basement?
I sure was.
were
No,
just a
no, I don't recall there being any windows there. Gosh, in comparison to today's, this is incredible.
So our home was first barracks and then the MD Anderson Library basement, right? So you were in the MD Anderson Library, but you and Justice Sondag.
Basement. And
Basin that leaked.
It leaked there too?
Basin that, the basement that leaked.
Okay, leaked.
And the books were very heavy. And so I used to sit in the water.
Oh my goodness. And then Bill, you were in,
All I remember is, I was in the law school very early. Then I left for this industry and come back many years later. So at that time, all I remember is it's in the basement and it could be flooded. And more importantly, from my memory, it's about a couple rooms, that's all, and a very small library. That's it. And then the dean, I was so impressed. The dean doesn't have a personal staff at that time, 0. And you have such a big staff.
thank goodness. And Jim, were you in the basement of MD Anderson Library too?
Of course. But I did transition to the new law school. That is now the old law school or whatever. And privileged to be here to see the newest law school, which is phenomenal.
Wow.
And kudos to you.
To all of us, thank you. And Judge Fry, you were in Bates, I guess.
We fluttered a lot.
Yes. So big changes. Second question, what did you find amusing, like that you look back and in your career, what did you find found amusing, funny? Any thoughts?
Well, I can share this with you. You couldn't do it very often, but I was taking Professor Mixon's oil and gas class.
Mixon, yeah.
Mixon. And you know how you have these, what do you call them? Where you can get a brief on the case without having read the case. I can't think of it. Yeah, and so I had not read the case, and he called on me. And I'm trying to give him the answer, and obviously not having read the case, I couldn't come up with the right answer. And finally he says, Mr. Bonilla, what are the 3 words that cooked this man's goose in this case? And I said, well, I don't know, sir, but they're obviously cooking my goose right now. We couldn't do that in class very often.
Some things don't change. Some law students not being prepared. Justice Sondak. Anything amusing that you would like to recollect about?
There was nothing funny. Nothing funny. It was just strictly. It was just grind from the beginning to the end. It was just. I can't think of anything funny.
Bill.
I remember Professor Mixon, one time in personal property, he took his watch out and said, if I give it to you, is that your watch? No. If you hold on to it, is that your watch? I say, well, no, it never even you accept it, unless I let go, you take property, you take personal of possession of it. Otherwise, it's not your watch. Oh, I remember all these times. Title never take personal property until it's in your hand and not my hand. All these days I remember.
Jim.
0.
You sound like Justice Sondak. Okay.
Nothing.
Let me say one more thing. I agree with you. Nothing funny. I don't know if they do it now. In the old time, well, if you are not prepared, you have to sign in, say not prepared. If they call on you, what do you think about this whole thing? Okay, I tell them what I say. And then your best friend, your friend, what do you think? What do you think? 3, 4 people jump on me. I feel so small. That I remember all the time. Go to school, the first year, scared to death of going to school.
Judge Fry, nothing funny?
No, but something that was very satisfying, and that was after all I went through at law school, of which I've described earlier, and I'm not going to pick on that organization again. When I graduated and they called out my name, I was fully expecting there to be some hissing from the audience, and there was none. There was none. It was very satisfying.
That's great. Last question, and we'll get our State Bar President to give concluding remarks. But last question was, what are you doing personally? The question was, what are you doing personally to make sure that we still have, that civil rights goes forward, not backwards? So what are you doing personally in your civic capacity as a voter, as a citizen, as a member of a group? What are you doing personally to make sure that voting rights are intact, that all those rights are intact? What are you doing personally?
Well, LULAC is taking a leadership role in protecting the civil rights, and I'm active in the LULAC organization, but I'm also active in speaking to groups about participating in the elections and in the different things that go on in the community. I'm talking about school bond elections, running for the school board, running for the city council. We take all that for granted, but we turn our back, and a certain element has taken over some of those positions, and they're bringing about these changes that we don't like. So that's why you have to stay involved and run for these offices. Make a difference.
Justice Sondak, any thoughts?
Politics was never my thought.
Bill, any thoughts?
I remember years ago, 50-odd years ago, practice immigration law, there is no reference books. There is no reference of anything. So what do? We help each other. And, well, today there are lots of reference books that you can buy. For example, well, there's nothing to do. Ira Kurzban, they have 2 big volumes. Even immigration department, immigration officer. So we got lots of material. On the other hand, we always proud of ourselves, immigration lawyer. We share with everybody. If you have a question, you ask me. I will tell you the best I know how. We work together. Forgive me to use a term that's terrible. Those are enemies. The immigration officer, we consider them enemies. We all together at all times. We gang up together.
Thank you, Bill. Jim.
And today, if anybody asks new lawyer, asks another immigration lawyer, we always share.
Jim.
Well, first off, I'll say to everyone, I've been retired as a lawyer for 15 years, been licensed for 54. I'm married to the same woman I married the first time for 60 years.
Yeah.
We have 13 grandchildren.
Wow.
We got grandchildren starting from the 8th grade all the way up through college graduates and advanced degrees and all. In saying all that, I would hope, irrespective of how I treated my journey, I would hope that people coming after me, I would hope that I could hear people say, what you did was an inspiration to lead me forward. I'm proud of the fact that I'll start with, I had a brother who's passed away now, who was 2 years older than I, but he made sure that he watched me get through law school first before he went to law school, because he said, if Jim can do it, I know I can graduate. and he did. He also was the first African-American law student at the University of Houston admitted to the academic society called the Barons back then, which is akin to the Coif, Order of the Coif. That brother also became the first University of Houston Law School graduate to serve on the Board of Regents for the University of Houston for 8 years. He was an accomplished oil and gas lawyer. Think about that. A black kid from the boonies out in East Harris County teaching oil and gas at South Texas Law School. I'm very proud of my brother. Then along comes my son, who graduated from this law school and now serves as the city attorney for the city of Baytown, Texas. Baytown, Texas, where the Ku Klux Klan had its headquarters back in the 60s. If I have served as an inspiration, I hope that continues. My sister became a lawyer after I became a lawyer. She retired recently as the Dean of Students at the Thurgood Marshall Law School. I have a niece who's a lawyer in the Dallas County District Attorney's Office. I have 2 former sons-in-law who graduated from law school, no longer my son-in-law, but they became lawyers. I would hope that people would say, you've done what you could do, and you've inspired me to do something, and I'm gonna rest on those laurels right now because I'm 81 years old with 13 grandchildren that I'm trying to take care of and do things for. However, I hope that those who came after me and the law students who come through this law school begin to do the kinds of things that inspire others behind them. You know, that's my position, and I'm gonna stick with it.
Good. Inspiration's a good thing. Last one, Judge Fry.
Well, I'm encouraging everyone I know to vote in this upcoming election.
Yep.
And in Texas, since it's probably obvious what's going to happen with the top of the ticket in Texas, I'm encouraging everyone that I know of to be sure and vote down ballot. Down ballot, that's where all the judges that are in your area, that's where the commissioners in your area, that's where the district attorney in your area, that's where all of these people are running, and you must vote down ballot. Now, you probably don't know who most of those people are. Google the caucus, CAUCUS.org, and you will find their endorsement page. I encourage you to follow it.
Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. I could have expected or hoped for a better conversation. I feel like I've learned a lot from your dialogue with all of you, as I'm sure the audience has. Let's give them another round of applause. I'm really glad we're able to bring all of them together, you know, these barrier breakers that open up doors for so many of us and open up doors for everyone and many of the people in this room. So while Justice Sandak and Judge Fryer departing, I want to have the opportunity to introduce our commentator, Steve Benesh, who's president of the State Bar of Texas. He's former chair of the Texas Bar Foundation. He's a partner at Bracewell LLP. He's a noted business litigator. And the thing is that he's everywhere. I mean, I first met him because he came to a Black History Month celebration that we had here at the University of Houston maybe 2 years ago. And then I saw him at the National Bar Association event also here in Houston. He doesn't live in Houston. And I said he would be the perfect person to comment on this really amazing dialogue we had today, because he's a representative of the state bar. He's a representative of all our lawyers in the state. And it'd really be great to hear what his views are in terms of what he just heard in this conversation, but in terms of what we can do in the future. As you saw from some of the panelists, they feel that we may be going back, the laws may be taking us back. So what we can do as a state bar to make sure we continue to go forward. So with all, with a lot of fanfare, a lot of applause, we really welcome Steve Benesh here as our commentator on our Pioneers celebration. Thank you, Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Benesh, and I am the president of the State Bar of Texas, 24-25 president, 3 months into it, sworn in at the annual meeting in June, and just 9 months to go, but who's counting? What could I possibly add, really, to the legends who we have heard from thus far? Think about it for a moment. You will tell people that you sat in a room and heard a fireside chat from this law school's first graduate of Hispanic descent, the first transgender judge in the United States, this law school's first African-American graduate, this law school's first Asian American graduate, and the first woman district judge in Harris County, and the first woman to serve on the Supreme Court since the all-woman court released in 1925. Remarkable to have that much insight, wisdom, valor, bravery, courage in one room. I will rehabilitate my reputation. I went to the back of the room because I had a leg cramp. It comes when I sit too long. So I'm going to give us all an opportunity to address the problem of sitting too long. These five legends deserve a standing ovation. He makes a block on me because a word struck me that was used repeatedly. I grew up in Scouts, and I have been a Scout leader all of my adult life. Both of my boys were Scouts and Great Flats. I stepped away from my role in Scouting 2 years ago for this gig because it takes a little time. but I look forward to stepping back into it. One of my favorite things I enjoyed doing in scouting was orienteering, trailblazing, finding my way along the trails. And it's a word, trailblazer, that you often misuse in the vernacular. And it's been used several times to describe our 5 honorees today. Trailblazing is not the person that walks at the front of a patrol where all you have to do is follow his or her back or his or her shoes and to step right into them where they're always in sight. That's a patrol leader. A trailblazer is not someone who goes and chops down all the trees so that those who come behind him or her walk on a neatly graded, flat pathway without obstacles. There are always trees in the path. Anyone who's brave enough to wander into the woods should expect them. A trailblazer is someone, and it's a specific term, who leaves a mark on the trees so that when someone is wandering in the woods, they see that mark on the trees. They know someone's been here before. And if they do it, can get through the woods, if they can get through the wilderness, so can I. A trailblazer marks a trail by marking it. We used to knock chunks out of the bark back when we know trace times. Now they do it with flags, or now they do it with tags, or if you're in a treeless environment, a stack of rocks. But it's not for the person who can see you and walk behind you. It's for those who come and feel like they're alone. And they see that mark and they realize someone did it, and so can I. And so when we hear the challenge of make your mark in this world, make a mark, it doesn't mean kicking a dent in the fender of society, although society could use a few of those. What it means is to leave a mark that someone else who is brave enough to wander through the woods that you or I have wandered through can say someone else did it, so can I. And I mention that because I cannot think of a more appropriate description for the 5 honorees today who blazed a trail so that those who come behind them with the same courage and valor they've exhibited said they did it. And because they left their mark, so can I. And so I apologize for departing from my remarks, but I knew today everything about you and by what you represent. And on behalf of the State Bar, I commend you. And I have to say, I'm humbled to be in your presence as I treat you all. All right. I'll put my wavering voice aside and return a little bit to my prepared remarks, and then we can get out of here. I want to talk a little bit, really 3 things, and I'll move quickly because I know it's past 6 o'clock. Past 6 o'clock, right? Okay. Number 1, what it means to have a unified bar, a state bar. Number 2, what is the State Bar of Texas doing from a diversity standpoint? And number 3, briefly, some of the challenges too and limits on what we can do in connection with diversity under prevailing law. First of all, the State Bar of Texas is referred to as a unified bar, but when that word is used, it really means that it's simply a bar that handles regulatory functions and the traditional bar association functions of a bar, where a man and so we are unified in that sense. We really seek to be unified in the more broader sense of the word, and that is that every Texas lawyer knows that he or she is valued, that they have a seat at the table in what the State Bar does, and that what we do as a bar, from the membership at large to the leadership of the bar, reflects the rich diversity throughout the state of Texas. That's important because our bar and the profession that we represent includes people who represent all the varied interests and backgrounds and beliefs that compose the population. We should be a cross-section of the state that we serve in every way. The more that our profession engages the diverse people and from diverse places and of diverse interests from across the state, the more likely we are that Texans can find a lawyer that of their choice who can provide them full and complete access to the justice system in Texas. We're not there yet. We have a way to go. So what is the State Bar doing in connection with diversity? Not many people realize that the very mission statement of the State Bar includes the commitment to promote diversity in the administration of justice and the practice of law. So this is not new ground we're trying to tread as far as the concept. It's there and has been in the mission statement, but it's making it happen. Is where we need further work. The bar is committed to working toward a legal profession that reflects the vast demographics of the population of this state, and where all attorneys can thrive, be appreciated, have a seat at the table, have a voice in the business of the bar and in serving our constituents, the citizens of the state of Texas. As part of that commitment, the State Bar of Texas created the Office of Minority Affairs in 1991. In doing so, the bar recognized discrimination based on race and sex and sexual orientation can impede the career opportunities for Texas attorneys and impede their ability to provide legal services to their clients. The Office of Minority Affairs works with the State Bar's diversity committees, and we have 9 diversity committees and sections, and hosts a variety of programs. All attorneys who are interested in furthering outreach and engagement in the legal profession are welcome to and encouraged to participate in our programs. There are two main programs that the Office of Minority Affairs of the State Bar of Texas does. The first one is one of my favorite things the bar does, the Texas Minority Council Program, the TMCP. I think it's among the best things that the State Bar does every year. It is a premier client development, networking, and CLE opportunity for attorneys in Texas. And it increases opportunities for diverse attorneys in 2 ways. It provides for those who provide legal services to corporate and governmental clients. And second, it exposes organizations to the legal talent of diverse attorneys throughout the state of Texas. The program is open to all attorneys, and it aims to bolster the amount and significance of legal work obtained by minority, by women, and by LGBTQ+ attorneys, and attorneys otherwise parts of groups that are historically underrepresented. Every year, there are approximately 600 lawyers from across the state of Texas who participate in the Texas Minority Council Program. The other one, I mentioned that there are 2, is the Texas Minority Attorney Program. And that is an annual one-day annual CLE seminar that's open to all attorneys to get important updates in areas of law and current issues that are facing solo practitioners, small firms, and women and divorce and diverse lawyers, not divorce lawyers, but them too, diverse lawyers. Also, the State Bar's diversity committees include a new committee, the Outreach and Engagement Committee that was created in 2022 to help increase outreach to and engagement of membership, particularly with regard to underrepresented groups. Depending on the issue, underrepresented may include, among other things, geographic location, size of firm, practice area, or other factors. The committee was formed under the leadership of past President Sylvia Barunda Firth, who was the first Hispanic woman to ever serve as president of the state just 3 years ago. We also have pipeline programs and leadership programs that are a critical part of promoting and increasing diversity in our profession. There are several leadership initiatives, one that I just drove here from Austin that I was at and will be driving back tonight when we finish, and that's the Leadership SBOT program. It's an initiative designed to increase diverse leadership participation within the legal community in the state of Texas. And if you ever want to get a jolt of energy and encouragement, come spend time with any of these leadership SBOT classes of 20 rising superstars in service to the bar from diverse communities and locations and demographics. It really is exhilarating. Another is law-related education products from the bar's law-related education department, which is designed to educate K through 12 students about the rule of law and inspire interest in legal education. And then finally, the promotion of pre-law pipeline programs that are organized by law schools, local bar associations, specialty bar associations, and you can find all those programs listed on the State Bar's website under texasbar.com/diversity. One of the other things we do, the State Bar has at-large directors. The State Bar of Texas has 4 at-large directors that are appointed by the president and confirmed by the board. And in making the appointment, the presidents are required to appoint directors who, and I quote, demonstrate knowledge gained from experience in the legal profession and community necessary to ensure that the board represents the interests of attorneys from varied backgrounds that compose the membership of the State Bar of Texas. And that gives us an opportunity to use 4 at-large positions to make sure that underrepresented constituencies or marginalized constituencies have representation on the board. Now, finally, I'll finish and I'll move quickly. Of course, there are challenges too and limits on diversity efforts. We've talked about some of them. The State Bar Act, which is actually part of the Texas Government Code, and various federal court decisions set a framework for the type of work that the State Bar is permitted to do in this area. The bottom line is that the State Bar, if you wanted to boil it down to a nutshell, may, within limits, pursue efforts to increase diversity in the legal profession, but may not pursue or even communicate about more general issues of diversity in the society at large. And there are really 3 cases that have clarified that limitation, that we must engage in a discussion and promote about diversity and promote diversity. It's got to be in something that's germane to the practice of law and not larger, although certainly significant societal issues in that regard. The first one was the case of Keller versus State Bar of California in 1990. It was a U.S. Supreme Court case where the State Bar of where the court held that the State Bar of California could not use mandatory membership dues, we have mandatory membership dues, to finance political or ideological activities when the expenditures were not necessarily or reasonably incurred for the purpose of regulating the legal profession or improving the quality of legal services. State Bar of Texas, it's a U.S. Supreme Court case. We are a mandatory bar. We abide by the limitations set forth in the Keller decision in 1990. Much more recently, in 2021, the Fifth Circuit issued an opinion in the case of McDonald versus Longley. There were 3 lawyers who sued the State Bar of Texas, challenging several things: compelled membership, expenditure objections, and programs that they claimed exceeded the bar's core regulatory functions. The good news is, coming out of the McDonald decision, is that the Fifth Circuit upheld the constitutionality of the vast majority of programs and activities of the State Bar that were being challenged, including its diversity initiatives. Hear me on that. The Fifth Circuit approved of the manner in which the State Bar promotes diversity. The McDonald court held that State Bar programs and activities must be for the purpose of, quote, regulating the legal profession, or, quote, improving the quality of legal services. And that lobbying for legislation regarding either one of those in the state or the functioning of the state courts of the legal system at large is germane and therefore is permissible. The State Bar, however, McDonald held, cannot lobby for substantive law changes that are not related to regulating the legal profession or improving the quality of legal services. Finally, and I'm almost done, in 2023, the Fifth Circuit, so just last year, issued an opinion in November 2023, hasn't even been a year, Boudreaux versus the Louisiana State Bar Association, another mandatory bar. And there the court found that the Louisiana Bar violated its members' First Amendment rights because it communicated information on issues that were not inherently connected to improving the quality of legal services or regulating lawyers. The court found that activities or communication or social media that included such things as the postings of pride flags, wellness tips, technology updates, community events were not germane because the communications were not tied to the practice of law. I must commend the State Bar on its response to that decision in November in reviewing all of the thousands and thousands of communications of the State Bar, of its affiliate organizations like the Texas Young Lawyers, of its sections and its committees, to make sure that all of those communications are sufficiently tied to the practice of law. And so to leave you with a quote, and it's the most recent iteration of it, the Boudreaux court said, quote, "The germaneness standard therefore requires inherent connection to the practice of law and not mere connection to a personal matter that might impact a person who's practicing law. I'm still quoting, promoting diversity efforts at law firms is germane, but opining on affirmative action is not. Raising awareness of the failure of firms to retain women is germane, but speech encouraging or discouraging abortion or abortion coverage for attorneys is not." Close quote. Clear as mud. It is a conversation that continues. I would not be surprised if we saw a Texas iteration of Boudreaux in the coming months, but it is an ongoing discourse with the courts of our land in which the State Bar of Texas remains committed to its efforts to increase diversity in the legal profession and to ensure outreach and engagement of all the members of the bar. We will continue to work to pursue these aims consistent with our statutory purpose or limitations under the law. But it ain't just us. I want to strongly encourage all lawyers to join us in connection with this. If you're not already involved, please get involved in your local bars, in your specialty bars, and there are hundreds of them across the state of Texas, or the state bar itself. Volunteer for a committee, support programs like the Texas Minority Council program. You'll have a blast. Or local bar diversity programs. Run for the board of directors or in any bar association or any position and other leadership roles, and importantly, work to educate the next generation about the rule of law to inspire more people to care about these issues. There really is a place for everyone in service to our vocation. I'm grateful again for the opportunity to be here. I'm grateful for the opportunity to hear the words of wisdom that were offered by our five trailblazers today, and I know that all of you are as well. Thank you. I love this law school. This is a beautiful building. I was pleased enough to be here at ribbon cutting, and it is a gift not only to this university, it's a gift, huge one, under the state of Texas, and we're all beneficiaries of it. I would also like to thank Dean Baynes for his visionary leadership, a greatly respected, not the state of Texas. We've traveled throughout the state of Texas, and we are beneficiaries. This is English Within Vision as well. Thank you for your time. Hope everyone has a nice evening. You do not.